Hi guys, how you doing? Nice to speak to you all. Apologies, it's been a bit of a break for me for the last couple of weeks. I've had some stuff going on, and I was unable to sort of bring any updates from a couple of the last matches. So apologies for that. But big weekend ahead, travelling down to Arsenal, Newcastle tomorrow, and then I'm actually staying down for the cup final on Sunday, so I've had an invite to go there, which should be nice on Sunday, going to see Liverpool Chelsea. Look, we all wish it had been Liverpool Newcastle in that final, and they came so close to getting there. What an occasion that would be, especially when you see now, you look at that Liverpool team and the amount of injuries they've got going into that game. You would really fancy Newcastle with a chance in a one-off game at Wembley on Sunday, so it just makes it even more frustrating that they kind of slipped at that sort of really late hurdle against Chelsea and deprived themselves that chance of back-to-back Carabao Cup finals at Wembley. That would have been another unbelievably great occasion. I can't believe that was a year ago this week. That was just I was asked the question actually in a True Faith podcast I did during the week about last season and what the highlight for me in the last year. I thought last year the best part, despite all the Champions League games, they were great, don't get me wrong, but that day at Wembley, that kind of build up to kick off, those 3-4 hours around about late morning into early afternoon, was just unbelievable. It was such an emotionally charged day, just seeing so many Newcastle fans who hadn't been able to see their team in a semi-final or a final at the National Stadium. It just was an amazing thing to be part of, and I'll always remember that one supporter I spoke to, the older gentleman, when I put the mic under his face live on TV, and he just instantly started crying because it meant so much. But anyway, I was on here to talk about Newcastle Arsenal. Arsenal Newcastle, should I say, and here I am talking about the Carabao Cup final last season. But yeah, down there on Sunday for the final after the Emirates on Saturday, and then heading down to Blackburn on Tuesday. So hopefully have you guys quite a few updates to come. But I just wanted to sort of touch base on the last couple of weeks, and then what Eddie had to say at his news conference this morning. He was in very good mood actually this morning, really chilled, relaxed. I felt last week he had a little, I mean obviously with the Dan Ashworth situation there was quite a lot hanging over him and the club at that stage, and you could tell he was just feeling a little bit irritated by certain things that were going on, and I think that maybe came across in some of his answers, but certainly not so today. He was really in a jovial mood and he had a laugh and joke about a number of things. One of them, the players being at the darts last night, Newcastle, the likes of Dan Burn, Paul Dummett, Harvey Barnes, Sean Longstaff, etc. were all there, and he said he didn't know, knew nothing about it. And when I suggested to him that, you know, the good news is they weren't in fancy dress, he said, well, maybe they should have been because I'm looking for a list of names now. It was all said, of course, in jest, but that amongst a couple of other things were the main topics. One of the other funny points was when he said he was asked about Mikel Arteta and that spat that they had last year in the touchline, and said, "Look, you squared up to him," and he laughed and he said, "I didn't feel like I'd squared up to him at the time. Certainly not how it was for me." But you know, he was asked a lot about Arteta and the relationship there, and whether this is a bit of a grudge match. Now, I have to say, I hadn't really seen it as that. I know, obviously, we all know what happened in November when Newcastle won 1-0, and, you know, Mikel Arteta came out with his comments about it being a disgrace and an embarrassment after, and then got off with it by the FA charge. They allowed him to explain that disgrace means, or disgracia is how you say it in Spanish, and that means misfortune, and it's all a bit of a nonsense, to be honest. But look, now you think about that, and you think about that little spat in the touchline from last year, and then you think about when Newcastle stopped Arsenal's winning run, of course, at the Emirates. There probably is a little bit to this game, but as I said in the True Faith podcast a couple of nights ago, it feels very much like Newcastle have got a rivalry with all the top six clubs now, whether that be Manchester United in the Ten Hag comments, whether it be Spurs after the 6-1, whether it be Manchester City because they've pushed them close a couple of times. Whether it be Liverpool because there's been a couple of spats with Jurgen Klopp, and again Newcastle have pushed them close, and Liverpool won here at St James's Park where I am right now with those 2 late goals earlier in the season. It feels like they have that with all these teams, and you know, Eddie Howe did say, look, if I was Mikel Arteta, I hold on to things. He goes, I'm not trying to speak for him, but I hold on to things for a long time, and I use it to my advantage, and I use it as a strength to try and get positive results moving forward. So it sounds as though he won't be surprised if that's on the agenda, if revenge, a grudge is on the agenda from Arsenal tomorrow. But I think what I wanted to look at really was the match itself and how Newcastle can win it. And, I've been looking at the Arsenal team the last few weeks. Arteta's pretty much played the same 11. They've had a lot of games to play. Of course, they played on Wednesday night against Porto, lost that game. Perhaps they're tiring a little bit. I just feel that Newcastle can really, with the goals they're scoring right now, the opportunities they're creating, the creation that they're playing with, I think they can really hurt Arsenal down the sides. I mean, you look at their back four, they start with Ben White at right back, who is essentially a centre-back playing at right back. I know he's been doing it for a while now, but I don't think it's his best position. And then they've got the Polish lad Kiwor playing at left back, who again is a central defender, and they don't have that attacking, the likes of Zinchenko at left back, or whoever the right back may be. They seem very structured in a back four defence, and I think guys like Anthony Gordon and Harvey Barnes and Almiron, if he's involved, Murphy, I think they can really get at those two centre defenders playing at full back. And I know Arsenal haven't conceded many goals recently, and they've scored a load, and I think the main reason they've scored a load is, if you look at their top six, they're all attackers. I mean, you've got Declan Rice anchoring the midfield, but then in front of that you've got Havertz and Odegaard as your two number 8s, who are essentially number 10s really. And then you've got your front three, and we all know Saka and Martinelli are class players, and Newcastle will have their hands full. You worry a little bit about if it's Saka's up against Dan Burn. Dan Burn's head's down a little bit recently after a couple of mistakes, and without doubt Arsenal will be looking at that as a way to hurt Newcastle tomorrow. Does he bring Livramento in? He was asked that question again today at his press conference, and he said, look, and I said this a couple of times now, it's not all just about what happens in the games, it's what happens in training as well. But look, I think anyone watching the Newcastle matches recently will be aware that Dan Burn's been done against players with excessive speed, the likes of Elanga for Forest, Ogben for Luton Town, and you would suggest that putting Livramento in this game up against Saka might not be the worst decision. But then by doing that, as Howe rightly points out today, you then take away Burns' physicality and height, and how good he is at set pieces, both offensively and defensively, away from the team. Remember, Burns scored a couple of important goals recently, and he's normally the guy with him and Fabian Schär are the guys with their heads on the corners defensively as well. So look, it's going to be a tough one for him. I wouldn't be surprised if Burns starts again, but I think it would be a good opportunity to bring in Livramento against Saka, because I think he can match him for pace. Livramento's just looked really, really quick in those games. And as much as I feel that Newcastle can get at Arsenal in those wide positions, I do fear that Arsenal can do that to Newcastle as well. And that is a bit of a concern. And look, you look at the goals for these two teams. I mean, Newcastle's last 4 games has seen 21 goals. Arsenal have the aggregate score of their last 5 games is 21-2. So everything says there's going to be goals in this tomorrow. Really looking forward to going down there and seeing it, but it just feels like Newcastle are in a weaker position given the amount of goals they've been conceding. However, this will be good for Newcastle to have had a whole week to prepare for this, just like they did last week and the week before, whereas Arsenal played a big Champions League game on Wednesday, and that might actually give Newcastle just a little bit of an edge going into this. But look, the midfield picks itself tomorrow. The midfield three are going to play again. It'll be good. It'll be interesting to see whether Isak starts. I think if he's trained all week like Howe says he has, I think he would be silly not to start him. I just think getting him through the middle, and then you can have Gordon wide and Barnes wide. That is arguably your best front three from the start of the season. If anyone could have picked a front three, I think it would have been Gordon and Barnes either side of Isak, with the likes of Almiron and Wilson and Murphy as backup. So you could actually go into this having your strongest front three. It sounds as like, I might be wrong, it sounds as though it might just be a little bit further behind than Isak. So perhaps a place on the bench for him at best. But I just think Isak, because he's played a lot this season and his injury isn't so long term as well, because he's only been out for a couple of weeks after that setback. I just think if he's fit and ready, he plays in that game. And look, I think his pace will really trouble those Arsenal defenders. And Newcastle are a completely different team with a fit Alexander Isak in the side. So that would be my worries defensively for Newcastle. I think offensively they'll be fine. I think they'll create chances. I think they'll probably score a couple of goals. But you do worry down the sides with Martinelli and Saka up against Burn and what you would think would be Kieran Trippier, although Trippier has looked better the last few weeks. So look, I don't think Newcastle should judge himself in these games. As I said in the podcast during the week, I think Newcastle need to be looking to next season. I think they should be building on what has been a really, really good learning curve, really good learning experience this season, and they should be building towards next season and not really getting themselves too downbeat about results. I think they'll do enough to be able to get a European place, whether that be the Europa League or the Conference. But I just think everything now should be building towards next season. And while of course you still want to win games, but it just gives you a little bit of a head start on next season if you can kind of work on things without having to feel like every point is an absolute crucial one between now and the end of the season. So Eddie in fairly jocular mood, I would say, this morning. Looked pretty relaxed about things, but he knows how difficult it's going to be down there against an Arsenal team that are hammering the goals in. However, chink of light for Newcastle, as I said, with the fact that they lost during the week and they're likely to be a little bit more fatigued going into the game than what Newcastle are. So anyway, guys, give me your thoughts on what you feel about the game. Looking forward to it. It'll be a weird occasion being at Wembley on Sunday and it not being Newcastle in the final after that amazing day last year, but looking forward to that as well. And weirdly, the bigger game in the next 3 days is the Blackburn one, because if Newcastle get through to the last day, get themselves a favourable draw, anything could happen, and this season could yet still be a memorable one for all you guys following the football club. So anyway, guys, apologies I've been away the last couple of weeks, but I will get back to posting these a lot more regularly. Okay, cheers for now.